It's spooky season, and have I got a good tale for you, dear viewer. It's a spooky tale, all right. Sit back, let me spin you a yarn. We set our tale in the most spooky location imaginable, Baghdad. You're watching the Minarchist's Halloween special, and today we are delving into the spilled blood of tyrants in a most unusual way.
My name is Harry Potter.
رابط كافور يا الساتر هل ساتور يا قاعد رابط كافور يا عبد الله الشمر ساتور يا قاعد رابط كافور يا الساتر هل ساتور عزيز ابوك يا الشمري او عالساتر كله تعلم رجعنا الراتي لوين مكسور ذراع اي والله الشيخ استسمع جرح من ترابط لوين
Saddam Hussein. Now, that's a man who knows his breakfast cereals. A man who knows the best hiding spots. A man who knows how to consolidate power. His story begins in the worst decade known to mankind, the 70s. Alright, so, in 1979, Saddam takes power in Iraq, and he immediately set about forging a legacy, something the man himself, as well as many dictators as a rule, was obsessed with. He saw himself as a sort of New Age Salahuddin, a champion of the Islamic world. And throughout his bloody tenure as president of Iraq, he'd spend the majority of the 80s and 90s cementing his legacy and image in a myriad of ways, and piss a lot of people off doing it. Saddam loved three things aside from himself: power, pageantry, and paranoia, and he wasn't very subtle about it. Now, this is a short video, so I'll not go into his grasp of Iraqi politics or the days of Saddam-era Iraq. You, really get the gist. You know, grandstand, silence dissenters, and craft a cult of personality. But that last one is what we're interested in, dear viewer. Remember when I said he saw himself as a champion of the Islamic world? Well, he went about hinting at that divine providence, like when he commissioned a family tree proving his descent from the Prophet Muhammad. Yeah. Naturally, most people didn't believe it. And while most people just do a 23andMe, motherfucker was over here playing Crusader Kings. Fabrication was the least of what he'd do. Religion had been little more than a tool for Saddam Hussein. It was the surest way to legitimize himself as the leader of Iraq's destiny, being a Sunni Muslim from Tikrit in a Shia Muslim majority nation. But it was also, to his thinking, the surest way to legitimize his rule before the rest of the Islamic world. This, however, made him no shortage of enemies, not only abroad but domestically. Another thing which made him a target was his own batshit crazy son, Uday. Uday Hussein was a gifted boy. The highest marks in every class he ever took. I mean, go ahead, fail him. You'll see the real result of that soon after. Anyway, as he matured under his father's shadow, he would grow incredibly sociopathic. He was somewhat of a habitual torturer. He'd torture the national football team, his body double, and feed people to his pet lions. He was also fond of newlywed women, or just women, or girls. Yeah, look, Uday was a horrendous piece of shit. So most of Iraq was naturally not very fond of him, nor was his family, as his sociopathic tendencies did not stop shy of blood ties. He brutally murdered his cousin, Saddam's food taster, and confidant in front of everyone at a banquet for the president of Egypt's wife. Yeah, Saddam wasn't happy. Now, in Iraqi folklore, the spilling of kindred blood brings with it divine retribution, or a curse. Also, murder, in general, is haram in Islam, so is doing it to a relative while drunk. So, yeah. Look, the Hussein family saw religion as justification. They weren't the best adherents, and I cannot make that clear enough. Now, while Uday was on a tyrannical raping and killing spree that made even Saddam Hussein himself shudder, he was quickly becoming a bigger target than the big man himself. And let me tell you, attempted assassination was sort of a national pastime in Saddam-era Iraq. So, we now set our scene in Al-Mansur in the December of 1996. Several Iraqi dissidents, clearly sick of Uday's bullshit, opened fire on his convoy, and quickly his security detail was just decimated. Uday himself was struck 7 to 17 times. He was in bad condition. Saddam would later visit his, loving son in the hospital, and he had made a promise to Allah to devote himself entirely to Islam. Uday would soon recover and change his ways, and the Hussein family soon became paragons of Islamic virtue. Iraq would enter a golden age not seen since the days of the Abbasid Caliphate. Anyway, this has been the Minarchist. Happy Halloween, dear viewer. I hope you enjoyed. Now I'm fucking with you, obviously. No, Uday was in a coma, and Saddam decided to donate some blood. Okay, so this is where our story gets kinda foggy. Saddam just got more paranoid than he already was. And this is where he makes a teensy decision to commit one of the most horrendous acts of blasphemy in 1997. Anyway, enter Abbas Shakir Jaoudi. Judy, for short. Now, I know what you're thinking. 2 Crusader Kings references in one video? Well, dear viewer, I couldn't find a picture of the guy, and 2 is better than 3 in more ways than 1. Yeah, that's right, I said it. Although I don't know how controversial that take really is. Anyway, Abbas Shakir Jaoudi was a real master of his craft, that being Islamic calligraphy. Now, he was brought in to see Saddam while he was in the hospital visiting Uday, as Saddam had a commission, a Holy Quran, written in his own blood. This is a problem in more ways than one. Firstly, if murder itself is haram and systematic murder is haram, then it's very haram to desecrate the holy texts with bodily fluids, let alone write it with them. Abbas was more than aware of this, but the Husseins proved time and time again they were nothing if not persuasive. Another issue is exactly why Saddam commissioned it. There are 2 reasons that are debated. One was that Saddam did it for his upcoming 60th birthday bash, and he wanted to give thanks to Allah for shielding him from the many attempts and conspiracies against him. And 2 was that he did it as an offering in order to keep his son alive. It was really, at least I think, kind of both. No, I don't think he was offering up some kind of weird blood sacrifice. Rather, in Saddam's own words, he said, "My life has been full of dangers, in which I should have lost a lot of blood. But since I have bled only a little, I asked somebody to write God's words with my own blood in gratitude." Obviously saying, since I only bled a little, he's clearly making reference to the attempts on his life and the close attempt on Uday's. And I mean, he also commissioned it not long after, in the hospital. Look, it's still weird as hell, but you can kind of see where his head was. Somewhere in between narcissism and likely anemia. Anyway, for those of you unaware, the Quran is generally about 604 pages long, depending on the layout. Of these 604 pages, you have 77,000 words divided into 6,236 verses called ayahs, which themselves are divided into 114 chapters called surahs. That's a lot of ink. Abbas had his work cut out for him, and so did Saddam, evidently, as apparently this only took about 3 years to complete. Now this should raise some eyebrows. The human body has roughly 4.5 to 6 liters of blood flowing around at any given time. Saddam claimed this blood Quran used about 27 liters. For reference, that's about 5 Saddams. Alright, that's feasible. However, if it was completed in 3 years, and it was, then Saddam would have withered away long before W came a-knocking.
It's gonna be an awesome period for you.
So, your standard blood donation takes about 10% of your body's blood. That's about a pint. And you can't do it again for another 6 to 8 weeks. In fact, the vice president at the time of the United States Blood Centers Commission, must be a fascinating job, well, according to him, for these numbers to have been true, then the realistic timeline we're looking at is about 9 years to complete this Quran. So, realistically, he'd have to have given 18 pints of his blood per year. So, quite unrealistic medically, unless he was also receiving transfusions himself at the same time, which defeats the purpose. So, whose blood was it?
So, what is the verdict?
I don't know. What I do know is I came to work this morning to find a very large bucket of blood in my lab.
Yeah, well, that's the sample, obviously, and, if it's too big, it's because Frank sprung a little bit of a leak there.
It was a mess.
It was bleeding like crazy.
It was blood everywhere, but we caught enough of it.
Yeah, we must have caught a deep vein or something.
think.
Wait a second. Most of this came from one man?
Did we take too much? I didn't think that we took too much.
Yes. You took too much. Also, there's traces of more than 4 individuals in here, and at least 1 animal. Was there blood in the bucket before?
It is a blood bucket, so yeah, there was old blood.
No, I didn't come here to get sassed, okay? I came here to get an answer to my question.
The only thing that I can tell you is that based off of how much blood is in this bucket, your friend is in desperate need of blood.
Well, surely some of it was Saddam's. I mean, that was the whole point. Well, there's a couple theories. Only theories, as the Quran itself has not been tested. More on that later. There's the theory that it came from both Saddam Hussein and the local Baghdadi blood banks. And others assume it's just some ordinary red ink, the cost of this particular blasphemy only being an annoyed teacher attempting to grade papers. The one thing abundantly clear about all of this? 27 liters? No.
They gave them the propaganda number.
Yeah, pure dictatorial propaganda to show the world the humble sacrifice of a dear leader, kind of like the propaganda surrounding Kim Jong-un and how his shit does not stink, because he doesn't shit at all. That's true, by the way. North Korea furiously insists Kim does not shit. The supreme leader doesn't even fart. Anyway, so Abbas himself did say it was Saddam's. However, he did specify that it was mixed with red pigment and ink to create the work. Now, in 2000, the Blood Quran was unveiled to massive fanfare, and to the horror of Muslims pretty much everywhere. It actually became somewhat of a diplomatic blunder. As if Saddam's claiming to be descended from the Prophet Muhammad and his little Kuwaiti excursion wasn't enough, he just alienated himself from an entire region. Well, to be frank, this was hardly the first straw to break the camel's back. Everyone had been annoyed with Saddam as far back as the 1980s. The Quran was displayed in the al-Marik, translated as the Mother of All Battles Mosque, in Baghdad, a place of worship open only to the Hussein regime's select few. The Blood Quran was shown off by Saddam whenever he had a chance, and for what it's worth, despite it disgusting a great many people, Abbas knew what he was doing. The work was apparently quite beautiful, as it was only the text that used blood. For example, an Australian journalist even referred to Abbas's decorative styles as dazzling and exquisite, before adding, despite it being written in blood. 3 years after the completion of the work prompted by the collective buffoonery of Saddam, W, and Blair, a coalition invasion of Iraq began over nuclear weapons, which, unlike that big, beautiful Blood Quran, he actually didn't have. Regardless, 2003 was a wild year. Saddam was toppled, his heirs were left dead, and the rest of the Hussein family was exiled or fled. Saddam himself, in hiding of course, not for long. But with Saddam Hussein in custody and US forces occupying Baghdad, they made their way through the city, one building at a time, eventually coming upon the Mother of All Battles Mosque, where the Quran was locked away before the arrival of coalition forces. Well, the Westerners were obviously confused. What the hell is this? Now, even though Saddam had been toppled, devout Muslims and the caretakers of the Quran in question were somewhat split. To most, it was just an egregious act of blasphemy. However, nobody knew just what to do with it. One side was all for burning it, and the other side wasn't. This was the Holy Quran. Some say it was defiled, and thus it was their duty to burn it. However, burning a Quran isn't exactly something one just does willy-nilly. What do you think this is, Sweden? Honestly, early 2000s Iraq was probably more desirable than Sweden is today, but that aside, several clerics, scholars, and the custodians of the Blood Quran just couldn't agree. You can't desecrate a Quran with bodily fluids. You can't burn a Quran, though some Islamic scholars argue that one can burn a Quran if it's been defiled, but then the question remains, is it even defiled? Saddam was hardly an honest man. What if it wasn't even blood, but plain ink? Well, you can't just test and dissect and prod at the holy word. If it wasn't defiled before, it surely would be after that. It was actually around this point, when the debate became just a little heated, that the man responsible for applying Saddam's blasphemy left Iraq. Good move. He'd spend the rest of his days in Virginia before passing away.
I have a boyfriend. Tell me why I'm stuck in the sand.
Well, most of Saddam's political opponents wanted the Blood Quran, as well as all reminders of his regime, destroyed. But others, like one Muwafaq al-Rubai, look, I've probably been mispronouncing everything this entire video, so bear with me here, but people like Muwafaq have argued that it should not be destroyed, that this Quran should be seen not as the word of God, but simply as the copy of the good word made on the orders of an asshole. This sentiment was largely shared by a number of prominent Iraqis, the consensus essentially being, you can keep it as a reminder of the madness of this regime and its elite, or just do away with it. And also, bear in mind, this was all coupled by fears that it could be used to bolster the sentiments of those who view Saddam Hussein as a martyr. Today, the Blood Quran is kept under lock and key. More specifically, 3 locks and 3 keys, held by 3 different custodians. 3 men who probably wish they didn't have them. The Quran in question is beneath the mosque, in a big glass case, in a vault within, you guessed it, yet another vault. Every once in a while, a few researchers and journalists are able to get a good look at it, but not for very long. And the custodians probably wish it just didn't exist. And that's it. That's the end. I know, very anticlimactic. My videos usually end on a more exciting point, but oh well, them's the works. Sometimes history just lives in a dusty vault. This has been the Minarchist. Happy Halloween. And be sure to stay tuned for our upcoming Halloween special next year on Bashar al-Assad's Phoropter of Doom. 1 or 2. And be sure to tell me what you think down below. Was it Saddam's own blood? Someone else's? Red ink? A mix of all of the above? Well, dear viewer, I'll tell you what I think. I think it was all his, all 27 liters of his love and devotion. Just a simple tale of one dictator, one needle,